episode of Behind the Wheel. We're inside the National Motor Museum. My name's Mick, I'm one of the curators here. And thank you so much for voting in our poll that we had last week. It was really rainy, so we couldn't get any of the cars out to actually do a Behind the Wheel episode last week. So, as you can tell by what I'm standing next to, it was the Lightburn Zeta that won out. And I've got to say I'm really happy about that because I am a huge fan of the Lightburn Zeta. It's one of my very favourite things in here. You would have spotted it was the Zeta Utility that I had actually on the poll. This that I'm standing next to is the original and the worst. It's the Lightburn Zeta Runabout. And the Lightburn Zeta is a very interesting story. It's a much maligned vehicle, but it's definitely an important piece of Australian motoring history. We're going to go outside in a second and go look at the ute, but I just thought I'd show you first. This is the Runabout, and this that I'm standing next to on the other side is the Sports, the high performance, high powered, much desired Lightburn Zeta Sports, and outside we've got the even rarer Lightburn Zeta Utility. So why don't we go take a look at the back of the workshop where Nigel is and check out the utility version. Alright, and here we are behind the National Motor Museum's workshop. This gorgeous eggshell blue, extremely rare vehicle is the Lightburn Zeta Utility. It's an absolutely gorgeous day today in Birdwood. Spring's coming, definitely. I'm wearing a hat because we've got a swooping magpie nearby, so this will offer me some level of protection. Now, as I was saying, the Lightburn Zeta is a really, really interesting Australian story. So let's go backwards, rewind to 1948. Holden's just come out with the 48215 or the Holden FX. So Australians are really getting into the spirit of owning a family car. The FJ was a very popular vehicle. By the time this came out, Ford's come out with their Falcon. So there's a booming family car market. What's about to start booming, and what has already started booming in Europe, is a family second car market. And a very, very ambitious Adelaide-based entrepreneur, Harold Lightburn, realised that this was definitely a growing trend in the market and somewhere that he'd like to insert himself. I really love the story of that sort of period, the late 1950s, early 1960s. Magpie swooping over there. Yeah, so that turn of the 1950s to 1960s, there was such optimism around in the car market that a white goods manufacturer from Adelaide could go, oh yeah, I can just make the transition from making washing machines to making cars. The Lightburn Zeta is a perfect example of what can go right and what can go wrong in those circumstances. So Harold travelled to a motor show, I think, in London towards the end of the 50s, and he saw a vehicle there called the Anzani Astra. Anzani was quite an old manufacturer based somewhere in the Midlands, I think, in England, and they were never going to produce the Astra. He bought the rights to it, and it was a quirky looking car, and he added some of his own sort of styling features. I can't remember the name of the designer, but there was a designer who obviously did it for him, and he came up with the Zeta. So it has sort of slightly pointier features. You can see a picture here of the Astra. It's definitely quirky. It's got these fins running along the side. I think the Runabout is probably the ugliest of the three, and the Ute, funnily enough, has probably the most proportionate body shapes. It's actually quite a nice looking vehicle, and definitely this colour, which is obviously a respray, I'm pretty sure, it probably sort of helps it look a little bit better. So let's go back to Harold Lightburn because he's really quite an interesting figure. Harold was a second generation entrepreneur, I guess. His father himself had a very small sort of backyard manufacturing industry, you could call it. He made some of the similar types of products that Harold did, so hydraulic jacks and trailers and things like that. As time went on, Harold expanded. He was involved in World War II. He was a RAAF serviceman. I think he serviced the aircraft frames. So he had a lot of hand skills. He understood, production methods and things like that. So he set up a factory in Camden, here in South Australia, that I think by the time he started manufacturing these cars, employed about 500 people. So it was big business. He had grand ambitions. So he was going to go from washing machines to cars, and that was just the next step before he went to helicopters and submarines. The guy had plans. Sadly, as I said, the Zeta, which he bought the design for from overseas, was not an ill-conceived vehicle. It's fiberglass bodied, so it's very light and presumably quite durable. It's got a Villiers two-stroke engine, which Nigel will tell you a little bit about later, but a motorcycle engine, which was quite a good engine for the time. Few moving parts, cheap. Perspex windows, that's how cheap it was. And when it came out, it was the cheapest car on the market. There was one really, really big thing that probably was the main contributing factor to kill the Lightburn Zeta, other than it being a pretty overall terrible package. The Mini came out at the same time. The Mini only cost I think 200 pounds more than the Zeta. So the Zeta was 600 pounds-ish, and the Mini was about 800. If you've driven a Mini, it is a 6 trillion times better car than the Lightburn Zeta. So the Lightburn, you know, I guess the main issues that it had, this one has got a bumper, but the original series did not have bumpers. So if you had even the tiniest little ding with something, you'd probably break your headlights. It was completely underpowered. I think the Perspex windows didn't help to that general sense of cheapness. And if there are other cars available on the market that felt a little bit more premium and didn't cost that much more, the Zeta was probably not going to be your first choice as a buyer. He only manufactured about, I think all up, less than 400 of them. Most of them were the runabouts or sedans. There were about 30 of the sports model, and that was also, I won't get into that story, that might be for another time, but that was also a body patent that he got from somewhere else, a Michelotti design, so same guy who would design Ferraris. And the Ute was the rarest of them all. They only built 12, and I think 8 of them were fiberglass tub, and this one actually has a steel tub, so this is probably the rarest of all Lightburn Zetas. There are only 4 of these that I'm aware of. Now, as you can probably tell, I could talk until the cows come home about Lightburn. Bottom line is, they were very tough to sell because they weren't a particularly fantastic car. It took him about 2 years to sell the stock that he had of about 300 odd. And then after that was sort of, you know, he realized, even though he did own a dealership network of Alfa Romeo, so he could sell these through a dealership network that was already extant, and it shouldn't have been too tough, he realized the whole project was probably going to fail. So he then tried to sell the Zeta to foreign markets, Southeast Asia being probably the main one, and that didn't go too well for Harold, so eventually he just tried to sell the whole plant, and I think even that was proving quite tough for him. So he ended up winding all the way back on his ambitions. Sadly for him, I really do feel for Harold, got a soft spot for him, but he ended up winding operations down and he went back to building washing machines as he knew best. I've never owned a Lightburn washing machine, but maybe some of you guys have, and if you want to put in the comments what kind of quality you can expect from those, that'd be great. But you've heard enough from me. Let's go take a look at the Villiers power plant. It's probably a bit of an overstatement, with Nigel. Hey Nigel, what's that you're hiding behind you?
There's some super horsepower behind here. You're not going to get too much of a look at it. No.
Let's check out this hypercar.
Ooh, look at this.
Oh, a bit sunny here. I'll come from this side.
There we go. She's a 3-type Villiers engine. 2-stroke, air-cooled, with fans on the side of it. 4-speed gearbox, front-wheel drive, drum brakes all round. 324 cc's.
And good for about, well, they claim 95 k's an hour, right?
Yeah, I actually reckon you will get to it. So the little drives we had around here today, I reckon there's every possibility you get along enough straight, you can wind her up, maybe with a bit of a tailwind behind it. It'll probably make it, I reckon. So
we've got a small hill here, but how about we jump in and give it a go?
Yep, let's have a go and see what we can get out of the beast, I reckon.
Certainly runs smoothly. Must be that big twin.
Big twin. It's actually kind of interesting, this. That's to go forwards. But if you want to go backwards, because it's only got 4 gears, you actually switch it off, push the key in, and the little reverse light glows. And then you actually get 4 reverse gears as well.
And you reverse the polarity of the engine. Yeah, that is probably the biggest quirk of the Zetas. Everyone loves hearing that story. And you can tell the way Nigel's shifting gears there, just like a motorcycle. So up for first, or in this case, first reverse.
So now we'll switch her off. Now we're in the first gear.
Enjoy doing a 3-point turn with that. If you need to get out your driveway, you gotta turn the car off. So it's got a distinctive little sound, being a 2-stroke. And you know, it's reasonably zippy, but once again, if the benchmark is the Mini, then I'm afraid this does not have too much going for it. This vehicle, I should mention, was very generously donated by one of our long-term stakeholders and soon-to-be volunteers, Jeff Nowak. So shout out to Jeff, thank you very much. He's now made the National Motor Museum the only place in the world where you can see the entire collection of Lightburn Zetas. So it's a great South Australian story, a great Australian story, a very significant vehicle, and a pleasant drive for me and Nigel. Hope you've enjoyed watching.
It's pretty good, actually. It's actually pretty good. For 1960 and built in a washing machine technology, it's pretty good.
Yeah, they're fun. See you later, everyone. Thanks for watching.